I am here on the line with Julieanna Hever. And Julieanna is a registered dietitian and author of the book Healthspan Solution. Julieanna, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing, Aaron?
Very well, thank you. And I understand that you are in, is it Alabama right now?
I'm in Huntsville, Alabama.
All
Yes,
right.
I am.
And how are things going there? Are people still milling about out at the grocery stores, or what's the vibe?
It's much, I can compare it now to being in Los Angeles, and it's very, very different here. It's very calm and very much the same. Our stores are kind of still full, same as they always are. I mean, there's slightly different hours, and all the restaurants are mostly closed only for takeout. So that's kind of similar. But when I just got back from Los Angeles, and it was quite different there, quite intense, a lot of panic and very strange, eerie, different over there. So much more relaxed over here.
If you were told that you had to go live on a deserted island whose climate was the same as where you're at in Alabama, but all you could take with you is seeds, whatever seeds you want. You want to take a pumpkin seed, any seeds. What seeds would you take with you and why?
Well, I would take as many leafy green options as I possibly could. In fact, we are growing some kale and Swiss chard and rainbow chard and some lettuce in our hydroponic vertical earth garden right now, because I always say, let thy leafy greens be thy medicine and thy medicine be thy leafy greens, because they are so chock full of nutrition. And if there's one food I would suggest everyone make sure they try to get on a regular basis, it would be a leafy green or cruciferous vegetables. And it's relatively easy to grow. And so I would bring leafy green seeds, all of them that I can get. I would probably try to get some other kind of cruciferi and maybe some herbs and spices or some rices or
What's the
what.
word cruciferi? I don't know that that's common usage word.
I don't know if it is either. It's the plural of cruciferous vegetables. So cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, these are all vegetables and plants that fit into the cruciferous category. And these things have extra special anti-cancer properties and all these different phytonutrients that are quite powerful in reducing risk of chronic disease and helping with immune function and all of that. So these are things we want you to flood your body with on a regular basis on an island or anywhere. So we have them, actually, we call them our top triangle foods, the foods that make a wonderful foundation for daily meals. And they're pretty easy to grow, pretty hardy. You know, they grow when it's cold. You can get some good hardy kale and cabbages growing. I'm not the biggest green thumb, I should say, but I'm learning.
Okay, so we've got the leafy green seeds. I'll give you a little more time, to shop. What other seeds are you going to take with you?
I would also take, maybe something for squash or potatoes, some hardy kind of tubers, because those provide a lot of energy and they are easier to grow as well. And you can get a lot of satiety and, they're just a wonderful food, starches, all kinds of different kinds of squash and potatoes and tubers. So I would take those. I would take some kind of like maybe nuts and seeds. Um, do you
Okay,
want to answer the question?
so what?
Answering and I can't even think.
Okay, so also on the line we have Ray Cronise, who is Juliana's partner and also the co-author of Healthspan Solution. All right, Ray, I know you're dying to jump in here.
Dying to jump in here.
What would you bring? Now keep this in mind, both of you. So on this island, you don't have electricity, you don't have machines. It's just you, the seeds, and a climate similar to where you're at right now. So that's what you got going for you.
Yeah, so I grew up on a produce farm, so this is easy. So everything that you just said is fine, and then all we got to do is add some legumes. We got to add some squash, because squash grow like weeds. They're easy to grow, lots of calorie source. Like she said, the tuber sweet potatoes, easy to grow. And pretty much at that point, and then maybe bulbs, so I would probably have an onion stalk, so it could start the onion because they're easy to propagate, easy to grow for just some variation in flavor and also some amount of starchy stuff. So you really need that starchy side and the leafy green side. So, and I would say that if it were long-term, the downside, and this would illustrate where we would want to go in the bigger thing with plant-based diet, is there's a few things that we would want to supplement with. So, and that would be the only difficulty. So B12 is an example. There's a couple of other ones, probably depending on the, the climate here, probably vitamin D would be fine. But B12, K2 maybe it's a luxury on a island, and then selenium, whatever. So,
well, I think the B12, if I remember correctly, B12 can be gotten from soil. I mean, that's where animals get their B12 if they're plant-eating animals, right? They get it from the soil. They don't get it from the plants directly or animal sources. But I'm wondering, what else would you take? I mean, I don't hear any fruits there. No fruit seeds, no nut seeds. I mean,
right.
Wouldn't you bring anything like that? Is this enough for keep a person alive for indefinite?
No, but these take years to grow. So, I mean, when you're talking about survival, I'm thinking about an instant thing. These would take years to grow. So you've got to have immediate food. Everything that I talked about, you could be eating within 3 weeks.
Nice. Okay, so let's talk medium and long term. What else would you take with you? Seeds.
Well, I do want to go back on the B12 because us humans couldn't get enough B12 reliably from soil. It's a very big issue for people that are eating plant-based diets right now. And that's why we're seeing a lot of deficiency. So we have all of our clients supplementing with vitamin B12. And even if you were on an island, I would still recommend taking a B12 supplement somehow, hypothetically speaking. But, long-term, yeah, it would be great to have things like nuts and seeds and legumes and rice and all those sorts of things. I don't know length of time because I said, I didn't grow up on a produce farm. I grew up in Los Angeles. I'm a city girl, and I've grown the minimal. I've grown herbs and stuff. But in terms of the foods that we would want you to eat on that island are the same foods, those whole plant foods that are going to provide nourishment and are going to sustain you.
All right, Ray, what do you have to add? So I'm hearing very generic things: legumes, nuts, seeds. What do you like? What would you take?
Well, the question is sort of framed in a way that it requires an open answer, and the reason why is that obviously farming and agriculture are far more diverse than that. So it's a much more sophisticated industry in general, or in terms of really feeding a population or even a small population. And so what you actually need to look to is model populations, for example, in Africa, other kinds of places, and say what they're eating. And the answer is humans can get by on surprisingly little nutrition, beans and rice, for many, many decades. So what will get you through reproductive prime and serve evolution is different from what's going to, necessarily get you to a centenarian, And so what ends up happening in all of those cases is that, you could live for quite a long time on all these things. We're talking about the first limit. Obviously, B12 is one of those things that we have a modern day luxury. One thing people fail to do when they talk historically about diets is they don't recognize that a whole food plant-based diet is a modern day luxury. It's not a going back to something. A lot of people that have sort of Paleolithic mindset as if that was an optimal time don't realize the fact that, that kind of diet may get you successfully through evolution through around 45 or 50. But what is going to have quality life after that is going to be something different. And so, in terms of where Julianna and I come from on this is the idea that, what we're looking at doing is optimizing health span. And in doing so, it is the modern agricultural prowess, which is at both the root of overnutrition that's causing an excess accumulation of age-related chronic disease, and the dietary restriction without malnutrition, that is what Julianna has been talking about in other words, for all of the time that she's been doing a plant-based diet. So both of those things, they seem at first to be discontinuous in terms of, what they are in opposition, like a dichotomy. But it turns out that one of the real benefits isn't about a survival thing. Sure, you can survive, but what we're really talking about is thriving. We want to add life to your years. And that actually requires this modern distribution system, but surprisingly, it doesn't require animal products.
Okay. So, well, I'm not familiar with your book because I haven't read that particular book. I'm familiar with plant-based eating, but I'm also familiar with all of my friends, of which real life friends, I have one who's plant-based. That's it. I mean, you guys are friends, but you're like friends from another part of my life, not from my where I live life, right? So we can come back to this a little bit if you want to, but let's switch gears back to the now. And here we are in the world. It is April the 21st, 2020. And yeah, people are going on food stamps and electronic benefits, and they're going to the grocery store. They're not seeing the meats and the cheeses and everything that they're used to. They're worried maybe about their protein, their nutrition, feeding their kids, and their means are very limited. How much money they have to spend on food. So, what comfort, what things would you advise? I mean, as dietitians and experts in this area.
Yes, well, we actually just published our podcast, Science and Saucery. We did a whole episode that published today about this because this is obviously something that we're all talking about and a lot of people are struggling. And we've kind of taken there's some really interesting angles to think about. First of all, the foods that we recommend always, the foods that we highlight in all of our books, all the 5 books that I've written now, and especially in the Healthspan Solution, is to focus on these staple foods: vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices in tasty combinations of soups, salads, sides, and sweets. And the simpler foods are fabulous. Like, that's actually, like, we call them quote unquote peasant foods, but those are really the most nutrient dense, calorically light, like the most nutritional bang for your caloric buck. So those are what we recommend all the time. And what's happening now is so interesting because, first of all, yes, there's this panic and there's this concern that for the first time in our generation and in all of our lives right now, in the last 40, 50 years, that we have this kind of possible thought of what if we have a problem with the food supply? What if there are these limitations? What if I can't get certain foods? And so a lot of people are kind of going to panic mode and they're doing like, over purchasing and hoarding and buying foods that they're not necessarily used to. A lot of people are ordering out a lot because they're not familiar with what it's like to get into the kitchen. And, you can go down that spiral, but it's actually a perfect opportunity to kind of get into the kitchen, to start thinking about food in a different way, and to start thinking about eating very, very simply, even just temporarily, even if this is just because this is temporary, we're going to recover from this. And knowing that if you had to live on rice and beans and potatoes and, very staple, very low cost, very accessible foods that you can grow in your hydroponic garden outside or on your ground outside, that you will be okay. And everyone, almost everyone, the majority of the population has at least some body fat to live on. Worst case scenario, and this is doomsday, it's not going to go there. But the truth is we all can survive a lot longer than we think without food. We all eat way more than we need to. I mean, chronic overnutrition is a big topic in our book, because the only way we've ever extended health span and longevity in all model organisms tested from yeast to primates, nutritionally speaking, is with dietary restriction without malnutrition. So less may be more when it comes to optimal health anyway. So here we are in this kind of weird, artificial, unprecedented, unexpected situation. And I'm really trying to encourage people to think about this as an opportunity. So if you're not used to going in the kitchen, just start easy. It's so easy to go online now and find any kind of recipe you like. So whatever ingredients you have in your kitchen, look online, just, type in those ingredients and you'll find recipes that will work. Learn how to cook a batch of rice, learn how to, rely on these very, very simple foods, and you may build habits that can support health and longevity and all sorts of wonderful benefits in the long run. So it is kind of an opportunity as well.
So how about tell us about some of the meals that you've had at home recently that are kind of examples of these back to the basic whole food meals.
So honestly, nothing has changed about our diet. This is how we've always eaten. This is how this is just our normal day-to-day life. And it's interesting, in our book, we got rid of breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, desserts, and because we don't talk about time of day eating, and we broke it up into, we have a chapter on soups, one on salads, one on sides, and one on sweets, all based on vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. So we have, today we had burritos. So we had some beans and some beautiful rice, brown rice with some tomatoes and chilies and onions. And we put there was some salsa and some hot sauce. It was a really delicious, decadent burrito meal. I happen to be a salad lover, so we make really creative, we call them, just, I don't know, hot and cold salads, or we're mixing hot vegetables and cold vegetables, whatever we can, and beans and all that stuff, and corn, and make a nut and seed based dressing that we just whip up in the blender, but all very staple, simple ingredients that you can get anywhere. And I've even found in Los Angeles, which has been much more hectic than it is here, I was able to find all the foods that I typically eat. We do a lot of soups. Like, soups are wonderful because you can do any kind of palette of soups. We have some Thai soups and some, Italian soups, and we have all sorts of different flavor profile soups, but it's a great way to stick in the most nutritious foods that there are, legumes and vegetables and herbs and spices, and you can make all sorts of concoctions to meet any kind of flavor palette that you enjoy, and really nutritious. And it's kind of fun. We've been doing a lot of batch cooking, where we make big batches of soup, like maybe one or two different ones. And then, I'll eat that for a day or two, but I freeze the rest of it so that if I can't get, kale or whatever ingredient that I love to use, I will have it in my freezer for those rainy days, if that should ever come. So batch cooking is a great solution right now.
Yeah, and I'll just add there, one of the other big misunderstandings about metabolism, and you really get this when you measure it. I have a midlife crisis, California girl catching a calorimeter instead of a sports car in my garage. So the problem here is that one really, it's not obvious, but the amount of calorie that one needs to lose weight, or to stay above, to maintain weight, is very small relative to how much they need to gain weight, depending on the food they're eating. So losing weight and not gaining weight are two totally different things. And why that's important is, especially using your setup of this survival mode. And I see so many people go down this road, kind of in a prepper style, and they make the same fundamental errors all over and over, which is, just because you're not gaining weight doesn't mean that you're calorically neutral. So, that's just like, for example, if you imagine a bucket, you have a fat bucket, you have a glucose bucket in your body, and you have the hose on both of them. When they're full, they overflow, and no matter how, if you keep the, water source on or not, you might say, well, this bucket can hold 100 gallons because I've pumped 100 gallons through the hose and it's still going in there. Well, no, it's overflowing. So in our compartments, in our storage compartments, when we just roughly do this around what we call macro confusion, but lipids, amino acids, which are the building block of protein, and glucose, which is the building block of glycogen or starches in plants. The idea here is that these buckets are of different size. We have a huge bucket to store fat. An almost unlimited. But the one for storing amino acids is relatively small. You've never heard someone saying, that person's eating so much protein, they're getting fat. And why don't they say that? And the reason why they don't say that is because it's not converted to fat. De novo lipogenesis from amino acids isn't a significant source of fat. And it turns out that one step down in that metabolism, the same thing goes for glucose. All those same people will probably say carbs make you fat, because again, they're sort of misappropriating this, that what ends up happening is that excess glucose, just like the amino acids, this stuff ends up leaving our body as waste heat within 4 to 6 hours after eating the meal, if those glycogen stores are full. It's the same thing with alcohol. Alcohol isn't converted to fat in any significant form in terms of humans. And so when you drink excess alcohol, this is why if you drink at night, you can be laying in bed and get really hot because your body's trying to dispose of this excess, eliminate this excess alcohol in your system through, in this case, dumping it as waste heat. So most of the food that you eat in a day leaves your body as waste heat within 4 to 6 hours of eating that food. And we can track that with a calorimeter. We can watch it happen. Lipids are actually the unique food source because if you can absorb them, they're actually stored very efficiently. And in the presence of any of those other things I just mentioned, they're stored almost immediately. In fact, lipids are the only thing that you can eat that don't significantly raise your resting metabolism rate, because if they get into your system, the body can sequester away in fat stores. And so while this seems like a contradiction because people are on a high-fat diet say, well, but I'm on a high-fat diet and I'm gaining. And that's only because they're doing an accounting game. They're playing with the amount of calories they're swallowing versus what their weight is. And the problem is that you're limited to how much fat you can absorb by the bile. So most of that fat they're swallowing is going out in the toilet, and they're not accounting for that. The same thing goes for someone who's eating lots of starchy foods. They say, well, I can eat as much as I want. Yeah, that's right, because a lot of the glucose, the pop-off valve for glucose, is very efficiently stored, but it leaves the body as waste heat within 2 to 4 hours. The same with the amino acids from protein that I was saying, and the same with alcohol. So we have that one of those papers, Oxidative Priority, that sort of discusses this. Myself, David Sinclair, and Andrew Bremer wrote this. But why this is important to what Julianna's saying is that when people are looking, and the way you're looking at this from a survival mechanism, humans are survivors because we can eat a lot of things. What we're talking about in our book and what we're talking about now is the fact that we are in an unprecedented time to be able to eat a very dietary restricted but voluminous diet of these healthy foods that she's talking about.
And not only that, but these are the most affordable foods. I mean, if you really compare penny for penny, and you go and if you really want to look at budget, dried legumes and dried whole grains are pennies on the pound compared to meat and compared to dairy and compared to stuff that you may not be finding at the store. So it's actually really beneficial, and it's actually easier to eat on a budget when you go to these whole plant staple foods anyway. So it's kind of like a win-win, especially now.
So this next question, I imagine you've heard innumerable times, and so it's always interesting to see what your responses are going to be for anybody who's had to answer this question or been asked this question. But if I don't get my meat, then I'm not going to have enough protein. If I don't get my milk, I'm not going to have enough calcium. I'm going to get sick. My kids are going to get sick. It's not healthy. It's not healthy just to eat plants. I mean, you can't just eat plants. It's not even possible for humans. I mean, you get sick. So isn't that true?
This is a narrative that is so deeply seated into our culture that it's amazing. I spent the first 12 years since I became a dietitian defending the nutrient adequacy of a plant-based diet, because I saw not only did I see the research and saw all of the myriad advantages of eating a plant-based diet, but I saw it anecdotally. I saw it with hundreds of people that I worked with directly and indirectly over the years. But I would go around the world speaking and saying, you can get your B12 from here, and you get your iron from here, and your protein from there, and you don't need meat for all of that. And I can go into the details, and I will. I'm happy to. But when I started working with Ray and started looking at the health span and longevity research, and like I said before, the only way, nutritionally speaking, that we've actually extended health span and extended longevity, basically decreased chronic disease and helped encourage longevity and healthy longevity, which is what healthspan really is by eating less, by feeding these animals less. So that concept is, I think, the intersection between a plant-based diet and the healthspan and longevity research. So less is more. We don't need more protein. In fact, I've been in the health and fitness industry for 20-something years now, and I've never seen a protein deficiency. Never, unless there's severe anorexia nervosa, severe malnutrition, which is so rare in the Western culture, so rare. Protein deficiency just isn't something we're worried about. Heart disease is still the #1 killer around the world. Cardiovascular disease is directly, indirectly linked to eating animal products and eating all of those things that people are so concerned about. And so in this pursuit of protein, we are over consuming things that we shouldn't be. We're getting excessive amounts of amino acids. We're getting excessive amounts of saturated fat and dietary cholesterol and heme iron and new 5GC, all of these things that are promoting chronic disease. So we need to stop being so concerned about getting more and more and more. And we need to start just kind of letting go and just realizing that less may be more. And there's plenty of protein. All amino acids are in all plants. You can get all of your amino acids, all of your protein, quote unquote protein, from whole plant foods. I mean, it would be a challenge. The only way I think you could do it to not get enough would be to eat just white sugar and oil.
Yeah.
That's it, because you couldn't avoid amino acids to that extent that you would have a deficiency. And if you're eating a variety of foods and you're eating legumes and you're eating nuts and seeds and you're eating vegetables, you're just going to be fine. You don't have to calculate or worry about any of that. Calcium you can get from your leafy greens. Better, kale actually has a more absorbable form of calcium than does dairy, which is quite exciting to hear, because it's like, what? Yeah. I mean, all of that stuff you can get. There are some notable nutrients, because no matter what kind of diet you're eating, standard American diet, omnivorous, vegan, anything, paleo, whatever diet you're on, you do need to be mindful of certain nutrients, right? Because it's, you have to think about nutrition mildly. So on a plant-based diet, we really kind of look at 5 or 6 notable nutrients that you need to be mindful of, because they're a little bit more challenging to get. Like B12, like we said, you cannot get B12. You need to supplement with B12. Vitamin D is kind of something for everyone, because most people are not in the sun or wearing lots of sunscreen, or there's a lot of reasons, but there's kind of this like worldwide concern about vitamin D. So I always have our clients check their vitamin D levels, because it's a fat soluble nutrient, unlike B12, which you can take in higher doses. And so that's B12 and then D. And then the minerals are iodine, because of it's hard to get a reliable source of iodine, and we're not doing iodized salts anymore, because people either have hypertension or are eating fancy salts. Are you showing the images? Can you see that, Aaron? I don't think
He can see it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, those are the notable nutrients. So that's iodine, and then there's zinc as well. And the reason for zinc is because in the presence of these plant foods, zinc, like there's these compounds called phytates, which are not bad, but they do kind of slightly inhibit the absorption of things like zinc. So there's that, and then finally vitamin K2, which is kind of like a different form of vitamin K. We get plenty of K1 from our leafy green vegetables, but K2 is something found in bacteria and found in a Japanese food called natto, but most people aren't getting enough of K2, and it looks like it may be beneficial to supplement that as well. So just taking a nice light multivitamin just to cover your bases, and then eating whole plant foods, and there's really nothing else to worry about.
Very cool. So there's a lot of people, I think, who are going to be noticing these empty shelves in the grocery store, and they're going to be wondering, but I love cheese, and I just love cheese. I don't know if I can live without cheese, and I don't know if I can live without my whatever product. And I'm so concerned because I've heard that the dairies and the slaughterhouses are closing, and the prices of meats are going to go up. But I don't know if I can I don't know if I can survive without my meats and dairies and things. But there's been many, many people who have went to a plant-based diet, and you probably know a number of them. What sort of helpful words do you have for people that are, whether by choice or not by choice, going to end up eating mostly plant-based?
Well, we always especially Ray likes to tell people that if you think you can't give it up, you should, for that very reason, because you shouldn't have to rely on something like that, especially something like cheese or meat, because there's no reason that you need those products in your life at all. And every single thing about food is habit. Everything about what you eat and how you eat and the frequency of what you eat and your favorite foods and your palate, that's all about habit and what you're used to. So whether you're forced into it, which I don't even think, by the way, is really going to happen, because this is all going to solve itself. It's all starting to get better right now in terms of the food supply. But if you are forced into it, you know, you have no choice. And so maybe it might be a good thing, because it'll enforce that where you can't have it. It's almost like giving up something like cigarettes, where you want it, and you can't get it. What are you going to do? Like, you have to deal with the repercussions. A lot of people do have some kind of, I hate the word detox, but like have some kind of, like, people do feel it when they give up these things if they're eating them on a consistent basis. But it's a very short window of time, and all of a sudden you feel the benefits of eating all of those amazing whole foods. And and that kind of perpetuates the process. And we've taken hundreds of people through our program, where they go from being on the standard American diet, eating lots of fast food and lots of these hyper palatable and all the things you're mentioning, and then some, all the way to eating very, very simple foods. And without fail, the palate shifts. They start preferring these foods. They find their new favorite foods. And we always say, until the new diet is equally convenient, familiar, and enjoyable, you don't have a choice. One or more of those will win. And if you're forced into it, it's almost like, maybe it's kind of a blessing in disguise, but if, it's uncomfortable, because it's change, and, and change is not comfortable, and change is scary. And I think there's a big psychological component specifically to right now of not knowing, and this unprecedented territory that we're watching unfold, and we don't know. We're not 100% certain on when things are going to open up and when the economy is going to come back, and all of that is really, it's scary. It is. I mean, we're all kind of going, oh my goodness. I mean, our whole world is in this together. I keep telling my kids, because they're so uncomfortable having to be stuck at home. And it's like, yeah, but we're all in it together. We're all dealing with this together. And, it has to get better. We're an amazing humanity is amazing, right? And technology is just, there's like this acceleration of technology right now, because all the brightest minds around the world are easily connected online, and we could put all of our thoughts together, and things are happening because we're forced to. So having to give up cheese and meat, if it's even temporary, maybe that's the best thing that could happen, because then maybe you won't even want to go back to it later. So maybe there's like this kind of win-win underneath thing. And at worst, you're a little uncomfortable, and you might find some new things that you really like. And I think that this is really kind of, I like looking at this as a real opportunity for good change. I think this can stimulate some really exciting, inspiring, and hopeful transformations, hopefully.
And I would add, after the produce farm in Maryland, when I moved down to the South, we had 200 head of cattle on a 400-acre farm. So I had a cattle farm almost all the way through high school, and I was a hunter. I mean, you hunt when you're in Alabama. That's what you do. So, and I'm not vegan, so that none of those things motivate me. I was motivated. My diet change is absolutely 100% my health. I had to reverse my diabetes, and I used to believe that was caused by, things like white rice and sugar. And, I had to learn I'd say the hard way, but it was fun and shocking, because it shocked my worldview that, the last foods I gave up, which was salmon and eggs, and my diabetes went away. Now I can eat all the white rice I want and have normal glucose control. But if I eat salmon or those kinds of foods for, 3 to 5 days, I can bring my diabetes, and this is type 2 insulin resistance, I can bring it back just like that. And so, back to what Julieanna said is that, and it's so important to just stop and think of the cognitive dissonance we live in, which is, the 10 largest animals that walk the earth, 5 species of rhinoceros, 3 species of elephants, a hippopotamus, a giraffe, a gar. All these mammals eat plants, and they get all this. In fact, no mammal makes all 20 amino acids. All plants have to make all 20 amino acids. And the reason, these are the building blocks for proteins. I should have said that earlier. But the reason why they have to is they don't eat. And so you either eat the plant or eat the animal that ate the plant. But the amino acids, got there through, starting in the plant. So when we say this, and we can say this confidently, all whole plant foods contain all amino acids, end of story. And nobody can prove that to be wrong, because the protein isn't something like, like an individual thing, like a diamond. Protein is more like plastic or metal. hey, build that out of metal. Do you mean steel? Do you mean titanium? Do you mean aluminum? And so there are 10,000 different proteins in every plant and animal cell. And then those, are built of those 20 amino acids in different sequences and different sequence length. And those are broken down in the digestive tract. And this is the part when when we first met, was this idea that, that you can get all of these amino acids, and the ones that are restricted, those very ones that are restricted, paradoxically are the ones that signal these longevity genes. And that's what's really important. We cover this in the Healthspan Solution, but it's so important. David Sinclair covers it, and also in Lifespan as well. He was also the co-author on Metabolic Winter Hypothesis. And so the idea here is we really can get this nutrition from that. And the difference in these, a lot of people say, yeah, but I'm not a cow and I don't have 4 stomachs. And that's actually to digest fiber, not protein. So anyway, I just wanted to hit all of those at once, because for so long, you had to defend really this idea of adequacy, and overnutrition can actually happen. And what we might find, it's not that these animal products are wholly unhealthy, but that a very small amount of them take you over into the fecundity, which is the reproductive part, but then beyond that, into the overnutrition that is the antithesis of dietary restriction without malnutrition. I'll let you pick on that as a dietitian. Well, just the going from adequacy to overnutrition, how you've looked at it different now.
Yeah. Well, no, we already talked about that. And I'm watching this squirrel out there, the birds out there eating their grass and looking all fit and healthy and running around. And, it's kind of funny in this context to look at the world a little bit differently than we've had to.
So as we wrap up here, what I'm wondering is, suppose someone's watching this and they're like, oh yeah, well, maybe, I can try, plant-based diet, I'm going to not eat my meats or my cheeses or whatever. But I don't really know what to make for dinner. I don't really know, what are my 7 or 8 meals going to be, where do, I don't want to be like going on Facebook and finding these angry people that just don't want me to eat my meats. I need some help. Where do I start?
You can start with our book. We have 100 recipes in this book, and we have recipes on our website on healthspansolution.com. We have on plantbaseddietitian.com. I've actually aggregated dozens and dozens and dozens of recipes, not just from me, but some talented food bloggers. So I have like a post on, 30 meals in 5 minutes, 5 ingredients or less, or, oh yeah, we have, and this book too, there's 50 recipes in this, and lots of nutrition science. Both of the books have a ton of science. All of our books have tons of science in it. But start with what you know. I would encourage you to start with what you know. Everyone's eaten a quote unquote plant-based meal. And if we kind of get away from the labels, it makes life a lot easier. We don't have to look for angry anything or food police, because that's, who needs that, especially right now. Nobody needs the food police. And I definitely don't want to be that. I would say look for what you're used to. If you've grown up, if you had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, that's plant-based. If you've had pasta primavera, some vegetables and some noodles, rice and beans, a bean burrito. You can literally take a can of bean, like we did for lunch, a can of beans, and put it on a tortilla, and we put some salsa and rice, and it was amazing. Vegetable sushi. If you have nori and you could put some rice and some chopped up vegetables and avocado and roll it up, you could make it as a Dorito. You don't have to cut it. Stuff oatmeal. Plant-based, you could use fruit that's frozen, or any kind of fruit that you like. Make a big fruit salad, throw them all together, different ones you like, sprinkle some nuts and seeds on there. What are you used to? Chili, yeah. How many people have eaten bean chili? Oh, hummus should be a food group. In fact, if you go to howdoyouhummus.com, you'll see a bunch of hummus recipes. And that's amazing food, and you can do all sorts of things with hummus. What else? Like, what foods do you know? Go to what you know.
This is just
Start there.
sides.
Yeah, eat just sides. Eat just sides. Last week I had mashed potatoes and gravy. I don't know. I was in the mood for that. It wasn't Thanksgiving, but I was in the mood for it, and it was delicious and very satisfying. Comfort food. Potatoes. I mean, my goodness, a sweet potato, and you stick some beans in there, or you a peanut butter sauce on top of a potato, or salsa and potato. We like to eat a lot of jack and potato style. What do you know and what do you like? And then play with that, and then if you don't know, or you want some ideas, that's when I would, just go on Google. You don't have to go into a biased Facebook group. Like I would suggest staying away from all that stuff because it is really intimidating. But just start looking around. Even look at your own cookbook collection. I have hundreds and hundreds of cookbooks. Not all of them are plant-based, but you could always find something to make or adjust. You could adjust any single recipe and make it plant. I always say nutrify it or healthify that recipe. And, you can just take out the animal products and you can replace it. Or
7 ingredients. All the rest are okay.
I know. Isn't that funny? It's really 7 ingredients we're talking about, poultry, beef, fish.
Seafood.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, that's it. And other than that, there's thousands and thousands. Do you know there's 40,000 varieties of rice that are edible? Try a different kind of rice, a purple rice, a black rice, a wild rice. There's so many things out there that, quinoa. There's so many grains and so many delicious foods that you may not just be familiar with, and just get a little bit uncomfortable, and it will get easier because then you'll just start building on your repertoire. Just build one recipe at a time. You love oatmeal? There's your oatmeal recipe. If you like to add cinnamon, now you've got something even more special. Whatever it is, you just keep adding and adding and adding and finding what you love and throwing out what you don't love. And ask people and look around, and it's better time than ever. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time here, and it's changed a lot. The access to the information and the recipes is just exploded in the last decade. So there's never been a better time to find delicious recipes.
Yeah, and I would say drop the macro confusion. We have a whole Science and Saucery on that. What I mean by that is protein, carbs, and fat are not food groups. These do not describe what we would call isometabolic or metabolically similar foods. So all the amino acids have a different metabolic reactions. Obviously, apple juice and the same calories of eating an apple are not metabolically equivalent. So that's an example. Even if the main calorie source is a carbohydrate, that's irrelevant. Cotton, paper, the chitin of a crab shell, these are all carbohydrates, but they're nutritionally not, we don't have we have the alpha amylase. We don't have the ability to deal with the 1,4-1,6 bond. They're different. So the idea here is that as we look at these things, we group these things together as protein, carbs, and fat, and that starts the whole confusion process. Because once you start seeing foods that way, which was a economic strategy from really the turn of the century, that's just sort of a slippery slope down to this idea that you think you're balancing your plate in a way that you're not. So if you see meat as protein and potato as a carb, well then that's a problem, because potatoes are the protein source and a high quality protein source for a very large portion of the population in the world. And a lot of people might be shocked to do that. You can go to the USDA database and pull it up. You'll find that it's every amino acid's there. It's got a better amino acid score than 90% lean beef. Not that there's more percentage in there, but if you get enough potatoes to meet your daily caloric needs, you'll automatically meet your protein. Same thing as substituting out rice for chicken. These studies have been done over and over where you substitute out, protein for protein. Again, not the excessive amount, because when you're eating that serving of beef, when you're eating that serving of sushi, when you're eating that serving of chicken, most of the time you're getting 200 or 300% more than you would really need in a day. So the problem is this excess, this overnutrition is the part we're not all looking at, because the way dietetics is all set up is based on 100 years ago when food was economically scarce. So as food gets smaller and smaller, as you get closer to survival, everything you eat matters more. But at the same time, and what we're really dealing with today, even during lean times at the grocery store, we're still talking about being able to be pretty affluent in terms of access to food.
Well, this has been excellent. I want to thank both of you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for
Thank
having
you.
us. Stay well.
Yes, and again, this was Julieanna Hever and Ray Cronise, and they are authors of the book, The Healthspan Solution. They also have the website, Healthspan Solution. And if you appreciate this video, please click on subscribe and ring the bell for notifications and give a comment and check out their website because I'm sure they would appreciate it. And we can all get through this if we just keep our heads. Thank you two so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.